Welcome back, all you ghosts and goblins, to Blastoise's Lair MetaZoo gameplay, strategy, and deck tech. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you like any of the profiles we've gone over previously, and be sure to comment below if you have any tweaks or alterations you'd make to this profile or want to see any other decks profiled. Please let us know. For all the information on this deck and information on other decks, it can be found at www.blastoiseslairtcg.com, as well as on Instagram at blastoiseslair. Today's deck profile is going to be on the Frozen Fish. Frozen Fish is led by a fleet of water and frost beasties with a focus on frustrating your opponent. These frigid fish in combination with Loveland Frogman create a pretty heavy control feel with the ability to deny and dampen your attacks on you and your beasties. The lake monsters are great low-cost beasties with nice abilities which can help your Loveland Frogman flourish. Beaver Shark and Ugwug can play a hand in protecting and can be utilized for low-cost quick attacks via Ugwug's ability to gain fleet with scuba gear as a fourth wall effect. Chessie can overwhelm the board at any time given the number of water aura pages in the deck, and it's probably a wrap if you're able to get out the Alaskan Ice Monster, as it's unbelievably hard to destroy and does not allow attacks or spells on any other beastie fish. The combination of water and frost spells will keep your opponent off balance while you try to set up your board to deal with their beasties. Dampen, Icy Path, and Sudden Camouflage all act as nullifiers to what your opposing caster will be trying to build towards, while the combination of Water Submergence and Chessie, when played timely, will swing gameplay for sure. Okay, to dive into a quick deck profile, this is a pretty heavy control deck, although we're not going full water and lockdown. So it's a 4 out of 5 from a control standpoint. Aggression, we're gonna slow play it, probably be laying some traps, so we're not going to be we're not going to be super aggro, probably a 2 out of 5 from an aggression standpoint. Ramp, on the other hand, it does ramp fairly smoothly, given that most of these are pretty low-cost beasties, and we do have a little bit of time to try to build our hand. The ramp works well, as well as consistency, given that a lot of these fish, fishes and spells abilities kind of interact with each other. It is fairly consistent. Hands about a 4 out of 5, and from a budget standpoint, this was a 1 out of 5. First, we'll look into a little beastie breakdown on these frozen fish. Fish of all different abilities build out the beastie roster, led by a few of my favorites: Ugwug, Lake Monster, and Beaver Shark. Ugwug came out of the Seance theme decks, theme decks, I think, and is one of the most versatile. He can be played as a trap. He gains first strike ability when flipped as a trap, but he can also be played face up for a cost of only 2, and he gains fleet, as previously mentioned, with fourth wall enabled scuba gear, and he's going to be swinging for 25 hit points plus fear. So last but not least, it also has an ability, almost like a la Laser Beam Upgrade, which will allow your Ugwug it's going to allow him to reduce LPs, reduce life points instead of attacking. So that kind of small change in terminology allows Ugwug to essentially swing at spirits, or some of those other tough beasties that might not be able to be attacked. Like a flyer is another good example. Similarly, Beaver Shark can be played early to get on the board, either as a low-cost trap or to help set up your board, which will his notation here is when he is flipped, it'll end combat. So he almost acts as like a smoky spirit, but it's nice because you're gonna have a 25 life point, 15 hit point beastie still on the board after you played that kind of smoky spirit action. And last but not least is the Lake Monster, and these dudes are scary to defend for sure against because of their ability to gain fleet if there's already one of the same beasties in the arena, as well as its attack effect to end combat after dealing hit points. All of these fishies' abilities combined will help you control the board and draw out the game a little longer until you can crash some Chessie waves on them. Loveland Frogman and Chessie, you know, honestly don't really need any introduction, and honestly prove as further evidence that Cryptid Nation beasties still reign supreme from a power and meta standpoint, but that's a different video for a different time, I guess. Not to get sidetracked, these are the beefiest beasties in the deck that we've made here. They revolve primarily you know, on driving destruction for Chessie's sake. Loveland's unique. He's nice because you could theoretically nullify all spells on opposing casters. And then, you know, Chessie's ability to essentially buff all of its attacks for every other water aura page it's going to be overwhelming. You know, speaking of Chessie, we've got Chessie's grandpa here, as everyone likes to call him, the Alaskan ice monster. And the reason he shows up in the spell book is for a few reasons. So if I mentioned the, you know, the magic proof and nullifying spells, which via dampen, which we'll go through in the spell profile in a moment. But if you're able to get the Alaskan ice monster out, not only will you be able to nullify their spells with some of the beasties, you're going to be able to essentially disregard all attacks on any fish given his ability. In the arena, all other beastie fish you control cannot be targeted by attacks or spells. Inflict this beastie with 1 frost at the end of your turn. Beasties with trout in their name gain the fish tribe. It also has an ability, which is chum, awaken another target beastie fish. And lastly, its move, if you decide to use it, is Crystal Cut, which does 3 frost and says, if this attack damaged a caster, bookmark 1. So there's a lot from an attack standpoint, but honestly, the biggest story here is it's ungodly 160 life points along with regeneration. It just makes it like really, really hard to kill off unless you have something like, you know, Morpheus or another kind of quick spell to take care of it. So, you know, that means when ice monsters in the arena, all your Ugwugs, beaver sharks, lake monsters, they cannot, you know, be targeted essentially and can start taking bites out of your opponents undisturbed. You know, it doesn't stop there. You know, if you wanted to, we don't have Black Demon in this deck, but you could really take advantage of its ability, Chum, and awaken the Black Demon a couple additional times, which has the ability to buff all of your fish if you destroy another beastie fish in the arena. So, you know, if you look through it, there's a lot of kind of versatility and power built into these water beasties. All right, next we will review a spell and potion profile here. So like a lot of the trap pages from the beastie profile and protection options, the spells are flavored similarly. Icy Path is the only frost spell that we have here, but it's going to nullify opposing attacks and deal additional unexpected damage to them. While Dampen is an amazing spell, this is an amazing alternate artwork of that spell with Piazza Bird. But Dampen is essentially going to ruin any unsuspecting spell that your opposing casters have. Sudden Camouflage is a really cool spell that synergizes awesome with all these beasties in this deck. So Sudden Camouflage is going to be able to be contracted at any time, and it's going to allow any beastie fish or dinosaur, which is key because that's going to include Chessie as well. So basically everybody but Frogman. It's going to allow them to be invisible until the end of next turn. So once again, kind of like in the mode of Smoky Spirits, it's going to essentially nullify an attack potentially, and your beastie will be invisible until the end of next turn. Agua Pura is a really another unique kind of water spell. I don't play all the time, but I included it in this deck because I wanted to buff the Frogman's the Frogman's ability to draw through the spellbook a little bit more. I think it has some potential here, given that almost half of the pages are non-water. If we read through its ability, it says, you may reveal any number of non-water pages from your chapter, shuffle them into your spellbook, bookmark the same number of pages you shuffled back into your spellbook. So, you know, you could be sitting there early or mid-game with a bunch of neutral or frost cards you don't necessarily need. And it could almost act as, you know, a mini new beginnings, excuse me, to try to redraw some of your cards. Last but definitely not least on this spell profile, we previously mentioned the powerful water submergence. This spell needs to be set up properly to unleash its power most effectively, but it's going to allow you to do a few things to really swing momentum. So first, you're going to be able to bookmark one, because that's water style, of course, naturally. Next, and more importantly, I think it's going to change all beasties in the arena to water beasties. So, obviously most of your beasties are going to be water, except for Lake Monster. I think more importantly, it's going to turn in the opposing caster beasties to water. So, if you think about it, you're going to have all of those water pages as well as some additional from the opposing caster. And all of those pages are going to buff your chessies plus 10 HP every time they swing. So it could add up really quickly. The kicker with the spell is that all beasties you control gain water type advantage for the turn. So all of those chessie buffs plus an extra 20 HP given the spell. So it's really devastating, and it's kind of once again a really unique water spell that can swing momentum for sure. All right, we'll quickly review the artifact, aura, and terra breakdown. So, really, this is a pretty straightforward build from an aura and artifact standpoint, but Permafrost plays perfectly in this dual aura deck since it's consisted of both water and frost, and that's what this artifact essence is going to tap for. Of course, we included a pair of Prism Aura in the build to ease the burden on the dual aura mentality of it, as well as neutrality totality to help with those lake monsters, chessie, dampen, water submergence. There's quite a few neutral spells and cards in this deck, so it made sense. Last, we did lean a little heavier on the water side of the aisle from an aura perspective, given the majority of the pages are water and some of the higher cost ones are water, but we did stick to 3 frost since the Alaskan ice monster does cost 3 frost to contract. Okay, last we will review some weaknesses, side deck options, as well as some budget comments. So similar to most water decks and control decks, if you can't get enough protection for your frogs, your fishes are probably going to suffer a slow death. The tough part about waiting is not knowing if you can get a Loveland Frogman or an Ugwug. You're essentially going to be feeding, some of those beasties to opposing casters. So sometimes you have to wait a little bit. You can't just throw those beasties out on the board. And sometimes you're just waiting for something that never comes, or it comes and it's a little bit too late to swing the board back your way. So hopefully hopefully the extra trap ability on things like artifacts or Frogman can afford you the time you need. But sometimes opponents can rush the board or kill off a few of your key beasties, spelling real trouble. This spellbook has gone through many different variations, to be honest, and it's far from perfect. I'm not a great water player by any means, but hopefully this can spark some inspiration in your mind, which is really the whole point of any of this in the first place. There are lots of different beastie fish to build this kind of same idea around. You could also adjust the number of beasties. You can have up to 6 Ugwugs and up to 10 lake monsters. So those are both really great beasties in and of themselves and can kind of be expanded on. I'll touch on a few inclusions we've play tested and will play test a little bit more, but I think the one that is worth mentioning, and I think I previously mentioned, was Black Demon, just because it's got some potential crazy boosters thanks to its ability to destroy a fish. When you destroy a fish, you control, you gain 25 life points and 25 hit points for all other fish in the arena. So it kind of acts as a tribal boost in a way. And the kicker on the Black Demon ability is it awakens after it destroys a fish. So you could destroy multiple fish and potentially beef up all of your other fish in the arena, to 75 or 100 extra hit points. So the other thing that I would, is worth mentioning here, I think from a frost water type of build, was some of the things that were, some of the abilities mentioned in Alaskan ice monsters profile, which refer to the fur-bearing trout. So all beasties with trout in their name gain fish tribe when Alaskan ice monster is in the arena, essentially meaning that they would be able to take advantage of not being attacked or of having spells cast at them from the ice monster. So we didn't go that route, but would definitely be another kind of interesting build. We did list this as a 1 out of 5 from a budget standpoint. It probably could have been a 2 out of 5, I guess. I think the priciest cards, depending on if you run a New Year's New Beginnings or not, or just a New Beginnings, and obviously the aura are a little bit more, as we always kind of review. But probably the biggest ones are going to be Loveland Frogman and Chessie from an investment standpoint. And those cards are available in Cryptid Nation 2nd edition version, so you'll be able to find them for pretty reasonable prices. And given that there's only 2 of each in this deck, it would probably be pretty easy to just swing it. I think the other thing is if you don't already have these cards, specifically Loveland Frogman and Chessie, are going to be played in pretty much every water deck that you put together, that at least that you want to like be competitive in. So though, if you don't already have them, they're good cards to have anyway. Other than those two, most of these cards are pretty cheap and can be found in either common or non-holo options. All right, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of Blastoise's Lair gameplay, strategy, and deck tech. I hope you enjoyed this frozen fish deck profile. If you have any other questions or comments, once again, please be sure to list them below, or all this information is available at www.blastoiseslairtcg.com and on Instagram at Blastoiseslair. All right, next week we will be, staying in the water. I think we're here. We might as well keep on it. We are going to profile a water tower eligible deck. So I'm actually going to profile the deck that I used for my LGS qualifier a couple of weeks ago and talk through a little bit more specific quirks and unique gameplay that came up with water tower qualifier that doesn't typically happen in say a normal tournament or match. So please be sure to check back for Revenge of the Frogman for next episode. All right, peace out. Appreciate you.